A late stage republic. What does that mean? I talk about it a lot. A lot of people talk about it a lot. You know where I first heard the term? My buddy, somebody I rely on for a lot of wisdom, Dave Reaboi, he's got a Substack called Late Republic Nonsense. Really is somebody who sees where we're going, why we're going there. And look, I rely on the guy's wisdom, and I have for a long time. So I thought we'd bring him on and talk about it. Dave, okay, late stage republic. What is it? What are you talking about?
Well, thanks for having me on. I started writing and chronicling. I used to be a national security guy primarily. And several years ago, I just started to think, wait a minute, the most pressing issues that we have are actually domestic. And they have to do with, more than anything, with our disunity. Now, that's not exactly what a late republic is. A late republic could be describing, any scenario where, we know it's an old thing that goes back to Plato, and the philosophers have discussed it, which is the cycle of regimes. Which is first, you have a founding under let's say a kind of strong tyrannical government, and then it develops into a democracy or a representative government. And then, of course, as what happens in every case in all times throughout history, is the people get corrupted, the initial philosophy or ideas upon which the nation was based, they wither away, people forget about them, they get corrupted, nobody ends up caring, the society descends into a decadent place. And then, sort of whatever happens. And usually what happens is that citizens really don't like the idea of anarchy. So when things really fall apart, there's going to be another kind of strong authoritarian type regime that comes up in the place of this anarchy. And the cycle repeats itself over and over. So when I talk about late republic, or probably when you talk about it, we're talking about this decadent time. We're talking about the time where we have forgotten who we are, and even the idea of asking, who are we? What is America? What are these things? They're met with a shrug, or even the response from many on the left is they say, well, America is anything. And if America is anything, then it's nothing. And that's really the kind of situation we find ourselves in. And you know what? It's even worse when you get to a nation like the United States, which is kind of founded on an ideological premise, a set of beliefs. Well, what happens over time always is that people stop believing those things, the things upon which the nation was founded, and then it just kind of goes on with, through inertia. And people kind of go through the motions because that's what people do. They don't think about these things all the time. And you get further and further away from the nation as founded. And then you start to have problems. And one of the problems in the United States that we have is that you've got two camps of people who pretty much understand what America is and what human nature is in completely opposite ways.
Okay, we got rich, fat, and bored, and too decadent, as you pointed out, and now we're breaking down the columns that hold up our society are cracking. There's no question about that, and they appear to be under attack. The question I get so often, Dave, and a great one I put to you is, where do we go from here, and when do we go there? Is it going to be some tyrant? Is it going to be a national divorce, which you've been talking about longer than I have? Is it going to be a combination of the two? God forbid, are we going to see some kind of civil war at some point in time? Gosh, that would be the worst thing in the world. Where do you see this going?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I think the real answer is that nobody really knows. I talk about national divorce not because a bunch of people are talking about it now, and who have been let's say we've been discussing this for a lot longer than they have, and they seem to think that it's a serious proposal for okay, what do we do now? How do we split the how do we split the belongings? How do we figure out the who gets what? And of course, I think that's not the right question. I think that's the question further down the line in terms of what happens. But think about a divorce or a breakup or anything like that. Even leaving a job. What's the first thing what's the first germ of an idea that has to happen before you go through any of that stuff? Is I'm not happy here. Whether it's a marriage or a relationship or a job or a friendship or anything, you start to think, I'm not happy here and it's not going to get better. And I think having the conversation about national divorce sort of forces that question and forces us to snap ourselves out of this, this thinking that really we've been on autopilot. And my call for national divorce, or at least to have that conversation, is, hey, let's get out of this autopilot, because the United States is not going to last forever. Newsflash. Nothing lasts forever. This is reality. These are the ways of man. There's nothing. Everything has a finite time span associated with it. The only question is, how long is it going to be? So if we accept that the United States will cease to exist one day, then we have to say, okay, what are going to be the consequences? What are we going to do? How do we orient our own thinking to get to the point where we start to figure out these things? We figure out, okay, what can we do next? You and I have been talking about kind of red Americans moving to red states and the virtues of being around other people that are like you, or even more importantly, that don't hate you, buying from companies that don't hate you. I think a lot of people, we know that, the Californians never stop telling us that there are more registered Republicans in California than there are, in any other state, even though they've got absolutely no power. And that's true, but it really sucks to be surrounded by people who hate you. And the moment you leave, the moment you can go to the supermarket and know that you're not surrounded by people who think that you are, some kind of horrible, evil, fascist, Nazi, what have you, there's a part of you there's a part of your psyche that just lifts. You're happier. You're more optimistic about the future, and you're more optimistic about your surroundings. I've seen this happen to so many friends who've moved out of DC or New York or wherever. They come to Florida or to Texas, and they say, oh my God, we're going to be okay. Even if the country's not going to be okay, then we're going to be okay. Our little community here. And that's what's important.